it's hard for you to wrap your brain around the possibility of it.
I guess just from like everything, especially from talking, and I'm sure you're going to bag on this, but like talking to someone who's, you know, competed with, like, what,
Okay.
well on steroids.
And he's used steroids and the whole thing, sure.
In physique, he's very new.
Do you know that I like talk to him about how, like he's like telling me about how he uses steroids?
Yeah, just frank. Most users will be frank if it's like anything you trust people with.
Yeah.
If they trust you, they'll talk to you right away. Most guys are just like, they think, I mustn't ask. But if you're chill about it, they'll spill. Like, it's actually not a deep conversation 9 times out of 10. That's the irony.
No.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, so like...
He's plotting, he's like, I'm going to start asking people.
I guess, so like, I see that, and from talking to him, basically seeing, for even him, the way the cuts come in.
Sure.
Once you take it. Then I see these guys in the physique, you know, pros, Jeff Say, those guys who are...
Easy!
I'm not trying to touch your boy here. He's got like a nice beach bod, whatever you want to call it, but like, he's not that big. He does not have that much mass.
That's true.
But he's on gear.
Right, of
all
course,
those guys are. So I see a guy Doug Miller size with that much mass and more cuts than that. How the fuck is that possible?
Sure.
And so I do understand what you're saying. It's just so that's like I'd have to change my mindset, which I'd have to consciously do, which I can try to. But like in one 15-minute session, I'm not going to get there. That's
so
honestly,
like just the comparison of him to all the other people, and like some of them put in the same amount of effort.
I mean, he destroys NPC guys, because I went and looked after that, because I saw how good he looked.
Right.
And I mean, he'd win NPC shows easily.
So I'm going to draw a dot right here. This dot is the human potential, okay, of what you can do. Let's. So this. Don't listen to them. No. This point of human potential, from here on out, it would require steroids to get. And let's just say, all things being equal, the awesome body. All things being equal. And from here over is obviously drug-free, and steroids obviously growth hormone, the gamut. And this is drug-free. And this is the number of competitors. Now, here's how we think of it. This is my. I should probably show this to Doug Miller. So most of us think of it goes like this. So as you get closer to this limit of human potential, it goes like that, and then suddenly the number starts going up because everyone starts using steroids, and that's what you're talking about. So the further out into awesomeness you get, this axis is awesome, by the way. The further out into awesome you get, the more likely you've got a juice bag on your hands. Okay? And there's this magic point, and before that, the more likely you are to have a natural person. And that's the logic with which you're looking at Doug Miller. You're saying, no way, dude, he's like over here, is what you're suggesting. Let's pretend that Doug Miller is that point. Let's pretend he is that point. Actually, before we do that, I'm just going to actually show a Doug Miller line.
And this varies from...
Let's say Doug Miller is here. You're saying that it actually exists like this. Okay? But the one thing I can say is that no matter where that dot exists, it exists. And there's one person who will be at the dot. Now, what most people find incredulous is that that one person who's at the dot actually coincidentally took to bodybuilding as well. That's the improbability part that I really see people wrestle with. But then I think to myself, wait, now let's just say that Doug Miller isn't over here, but he is actually the dot. And we have to accept that one person's going to be on that line, right? Would you agree with that? That there's a line that we always talk about in this section, but when they have to converge. So let's just say that dot is Doug Miller.
Doug.
And he's the line. Do you think it's possible that he is the only person with his genetics? In the billions and billions of people on this planet, would you say it's likely that maybe 5 other people have his genetics, but he's the only one bodybuilding, or maybe even 10, or even 100, but he's the only one expressing them? Would you agree with that? Now, it does take the possibilities down a little bit, but it doesn't change the idea that one person still has to be at that dot. That's how I think of the extreme people. I could be dealing with the dot right now. I could be dealing with the borderline. And what is it in me that makes me want to think the borderline is somewhere else other than that person? If that person is giving me clues, little telltale signs that make me say, oh, it's probably not the right, like he hangs out with lob line, or what, these little clues, then I might say he might not be the dot and he is over here in the purple. And clearly he's beyond, he's in this zone somewhere. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is it hard for you to believe that he's the line? If I said it that way.
No.
Right.
I'm just a little confused by the graph with the...
It's one of my graphs, of course you're confused.
With the steroid side. Just like...
what I'm saying is that the x-axis is awesomeness.
Yeah.
In its, progression of awesomeness.
Yeah.
And what it is that, all right, so this is all the natural, so these are all the drug-free, okay? I didn't really write it correctly, I just was scribbling. So these are all the naturals, okay? And then these are all the users. I hate to use it.
I feel like it almost be more of an X because there are a lot of users that are below their, human potential.
Sure, we don't know. I'm talking about strictly based on what we see, not based on how they perform. So you were reading it as like the sum potential. I'm just talking about what we see, as far as what we can see, okay? So you're right, because if it was full potential, we'd probably make a big X and carry it down. Now, I'm not saying that Doug is, or Doug's not. How do we know? We don't. But as far as my expectations, that's the point. That's the cutoff right there. So unfortunately, without any credible reason for me to doubt, I have to say he might be a line, or a dot person. I mean, it's not just one person, it's probably a whole population of them.
I think that's the thing. I think just because the sample sizes are so different, like you're dealing with billions, and it's just because the brain can't really process
fathom all those
how
people.
many people that is. Out of that is very reasonable when you put it in that perspective. But when you just look at it compared to the number of people who you see lifting, which is such a small sample size comparatively, it just is so difficult to be on that page unless you just kind of regularly remind yourself of that.
That's what I'm saying about how our emotions color our expectations. And the people who, the influences, I should say, that most conjure those emotions are the people around us. So we're going to base our conviction based on the emotions we feel that are created by the community we're in. And if we're in this community that is constantly full of skepticism or doubt, or that can't be real, the emotions are set that way. So then when you have it on a small, a Northeastern college bubble level, but that may not apply to the billion-person world level. It may totally work in this microcosm as a way to set your instincts, because it's college and the bros and steroids are all over this campus. Whatever expectations have been set and convicted. But we have to scale up. And I'm saying that model that we all use in our local world rarely scales up to the billions logically. Logically scales up. You can scale anything up you want. But the logic is well, it's not about the whole world. Well, no, I can believe that someone's got to be sitting on that fucking line. And he probably, I could see, why couldn't it look like Doug? It might be even better than him. We don't even know, but it's just got to be someone who's on that line, If I shredded Corey up, it's going to take years. But the scale of Corey is the scale of Doug. Don't forget that. The scales are similar. Different body part strengths and weaknesses, but the scale of the two men is similar. Corey's shorter, whatever, but the density of all of his muscles and the tightness of his skin, if he was shredded, this is him, this is a little bit of an accident. The kid can barely get a few plates. He's a little bit of an accident. So you can see how some of this is just his genetic makeup. I hate to talk about something out of turn, but it's that idea. I was talking about this with Alex. Alex's base shape, the way his muscles connect, give him the shape of what a bodybuilder should look like, even though he needs to grow 300 pounds. You know what I mean? Dave is actually our best example of that genetic expression. Because when he gets a pump on, haven't you seen it? He's in the gym wow, I guess Dave can bodybuild. Then he comes in, he's like, sorry, I was working with the drummer, and he looks like a scarecrow. And you're like, what the hell happened to Dave, We live in a world full of unexpressed potentials. All of us. The likelihood that there are probably thousands of Doug Millers, a super race running around this planet that just never ate well or went to the gym. I actually personally believe that's a high likelihood, not a low one. I think it's a very probable idea when you look at how few people even do this at all. So you take the population of people who did it, we dump them in the gym, and what popped out was a whole rather large subset of great bodies. And that's just a random sample. And the rest of the humanity's out there. I wonder if we dump the whole thing in, what we get out. Probably the similar percentage,
And so the reason that he would be at a higher level, just like his genetic makeup, and like those people, those kids that are supposed to have like double muscle, like the myostatin.
Double muscle, yeah.
The
Yeah.
myostatin deficiency.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically like that or something similar.
You could have
Genetic.
some wonderful genetic dad that gave him this capacity that when using the same tools that you and I use, he's getting this other result. Now, I went through this whole...
Is that likely? Like, what's likelier?
I think this is likelier, yeah. I think it is likelier. You don't think it's likely that there would be a
So
dot,
at the end
that
of-
we'd find the dot?
At the end of the day, there's just no certainty in, does he do it or not? Like,
Right, of course.
We can't truly know.
Well,
but
here's a...
in general, as like a rule of thumb, just like,
There isn't one.
a rule
Human
of-
behavior, rule of thumb, who are you? You're about to go into finance, kid. There ain't no rule of thumb with human behavior. That's called the stock market.
All right, well, listen to me.
No, what were you going to say that?
The rule, at least the way I generally look at it, is the better you look, the more likely.
You said something right. Exactly right. This is his whole life. Why wouldn't he? What were you going to say?
Just basically, if he's where he is right now, right? And
He's
has,
the dot. Let's put it in the
he
dot.
has a
Yeah.
decent amount of recognition, but I'd never even heard of him before. And I follow.
I'm getting there, kid.
I
Stick
follow a
with me.
lot
I'm
of
getting
people.
there.
He could get. I mean, look at
This
how
is so
much.
unproductive yet productive at the same
I mean,
time.
you just see how much other people with physiques not nearly what he has, the followings they have, and they have a much higher potential to make more money and
Right.
have a better living.
Right.
Why would he not take his body to the next level? If he's clean right now, why would he not fucking jump on shit and become
Mr.
an
Olympia.
absolute freak of
Yeah.
nature? And
So we have we got three different things going on. We have a leadership paradigm, we have an ethical paradigm, and then we have a logic paradigm. So I want to hit the logic one first. This trend, okay? It doesn't mean that all of these 50, but that there's a higher likelihood. But correlation is not causation. That's 50 randoms, okay? What I'm saying is that this doesn't work for all of humanity, even if it works for everyone visibly in bodybuilding. So, in other words, the likelihood that the majority of awesome genetic talent is not lifting, I would argue and posit that is actually higher because those awesome genetic people don't look good. They don't think about going to the gym. They might not even be entering the system. Arguably, it would be the people who are lesser, which would preclude higher use. So there's another way to spin it, in other words, that the correlation could be the result of the deficit people who go into bodybuilding out of insecurity. As opposed to...
I just question whether it is possible to have a real-life human who doesn't, like, die of a disorder or something, who has genetics to look like Doug Miller. Does this genome exist?
I believe it does. I can't say that Doug Miller is it, but I'm going to say, but I got to hit something because you said it's his whole life. That undercut any doubt that I had. Look, if in 2 weeks they say, we found out he's on steroids, I'd be like, oh, obviously. Like, trust me, I'm not above it. If someone said, guess what, he was on the whole time, I'd be like, oh, well, that's obvious. Like, it wouldn't shock me. I wouldn't be like, oh! But to that same argument, what I have to say is that he is... Now, this is where it's going to be insulting if he ever sees this video. I apologize, Doug Miller. I'm being a pundit. I'm being exaggerated for a point. Doug Miller is such a stick-in-the-mud hard-ass. Like, even the way he poses, it's like, crack a smile, motherfucker. I mean, not because you're happy, but because you actually look like a dick. Like, just, what the fuck are you representing, motherfucker? You got the body. Grin a little. Calm down about the... it's almost out... that just might be his face. He might have resting bitch face. I mean, and if you have resting bitch face, you don't know you have bitch face, so maybe he has resting bitch face. I don't know. It's not that you have to smile. That's not my point. My point is, though, it's just indicative of somebody who, like, lives and breathes and eats this sport, and none of us have ever done that. And how many naturals have we really met who do that? Not many. So that could be the other magic dot point, that you have genetics, and then you have a pure, pristine, like this man was born with Adderall pumping through his brain, not blood. He has hyperfocus. He has super discipline. He seems type A as the day is long. It's like one of these people who is just such a brutal hard ass. And that's the thing we always, when we talk about, yeah, I'm 110%, bro, and we imagine that we're really badass, but then in 6 hours we're having a beer, It's like, yeah, none of us is really as badass as we pretend to be, but Doug Miller actually is as hard-ass as the rest of us pretend to be. And isn't that what would make it, especially if it's like a personality trait that he's had since he was 12? That's where you have to start, like, that's where I start leveraging and saying, wow, if I was a hard ass for a decade, non-stop, I bet I'd be pretty awesome. But the most of hard ass, I could probably get like 4 days on hard assery. And then I'm like, oh,
I think it is a positive indicator for his case. Like, yeah, the stronger your work ethic, the correlation.
That's all I'm saying.
Like, looking better. Like, yeah, that makes sense. But I feel like maybe I just don't have a large enough sample size, like
Sure.
reliable sample size,
Sure.
to know like what natty limit it actually is. Because when I look at
where the dot actually sits. Exactly.
Yeah, like it's tough to know because a bunch of these guys are lying about that shit anyways. So you can't say
Right.
like, all right, these are all the natty guys. That's what they look like. These are all the roidy guys. That's what they look like. And, like, let's compare. And then Doug Miller. Let's see like what does he look more like. We don't have those two first groups.
Right.
We don't fucking know.
And unfortunately, I don't have the biggest sample set either, but I have a larger one.
Yeah,
and that's why I look at, like I said when I started this whole lecture, the detritus around them.
Like, have you ever met somebody who you, for whatever reason, you're just like 100% positive that they're natty, and they look something close to Doug Miller? Or is this like?
I fortunately have met a few. That's my other thing, is I've worked with athletes who, prepping for a contest, I'm like, they take off the shirt and I go, like I have to kind of sit a minute and be like, how does that happen? Like, every minute, I've known them for years, and I know they haven't been on steroids, but you're just like, clearly my expectations are blown out of the water right now. I had no idea. I stood next to both the men. Ali's upper chassis is roughly similar in heft to Doug Miller's. As far as sheer density of muscle, they're pretty fucking close. Doug has more cuts, and Doug has better legs, and Doug has a lot more going on than Ali does, but there's a lot of similarity there. They're not apples and oranges. So I sort of say, if Ali was here on the spectrum, it's such a big jump for me to think that, I know Ali, for me as the coach, I guess I can jump enough. That's roughly the same leap. It's not that far of a leap.
I mean, Doug Miller's not getting a PhD. Like, he has a lot more time.
Sure. So, unfortunately, I have a lot of reasons, like I originally said. Most is the ethic that make me say that.
I think, but he specifically doesn't seem to have a reason, like he wasn't, like maybe it was a problem.
Come on again, because that's actually what I was about to just say to wrap this up. What were you saying?
He didn't have a reason. He was part of a natural team. He was, helping out. I mean, it seems more legitimate just because his goals. What would the reason for him to take?
Right, there was a benevolence there.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Now, we don't know Doug Miller's life, and there might be some massive benevolence that going pro has done in his surrounding life.
He could just be like a virtuous guy who's like, steroids are unethical.
Right, and maybe he's influencing the next generation. We don't know. But here's where I draw the line. No matter how many times I have researched that motherfucker over the past 3 years, I get the same goose egg. I don't find it. I don't find that. That doesn't make me suspicious that he's on steroids, but I see why people would doubt him, because there's no. If he is the dot, if we found the dot, not that he has to be vain about it, because apparently he's a very humble man in many ways, and he likes things simple. So, in spite of having the best body and showing it off, I mean, he's actually, like, his personality is toward humility. But nonetheless, like Alex is saying, if you have the thing, the holy grail thing, isn't there, like, much more importance to just put it out there under heightened scrutiny so people can see and set their expectations, like Nate's been struggling with expectations. If that was out there as a shining example, people knew who and what Doug Miller was, isn't that more important than just, like a bodybuilder? Like, that's what makes people skeptical, is it's like he's just doing it. It looks like he's just doing it for himself or for his business, which, and for business, I suppose is a good reason, but it's still like, that's still a self-serving. That's not like that doesn't have the purport of, like, we found the one genetic missing link. That's a pretty big thing. Shouldn't we be helping those who struggle like I did when I was 21 and trying to believe what natural is, and you guys are trying to do right now, trying to figure out what natural is? Of all the people who should be stepping up, wouldn't it be the Doug Millers of the world? And that's why I deflate on him. That's why I'm like, okay, that's a great body. And then I just, because that's it. It's just a great body. So, okay, even if I believe he's natural, it's like, okay, my expectations are set, whatever, but nothing inside of me changes now. No, our direction doesn't change. Doug Miller could change direction. So it is a hard call to this man, whoever he is. Like, dude, you are below your calling right now. Granted, you are exactly what everyone needs to see, but you're not helping us see it. You're not erasing the skepticism, speaking profoundly, except within the small circle of natural bodybuilding, wherein you're talking to the converted anyway. Like, they want to believe that you're clean, so they're irrelevant. What about in football, baseball, basketball? What about in the big world? What about the kids in college? What about whoever, right? Like, that's who needs to fucking have the champion. So the trophy doesn't make you the champion until you act like the champion, kind of. That is typically my first point of skepticism on someone. In his case, because his work ethic, that's why I battle. I say, I can believe he's clean. I just think that he's not evolved. And that's what you're saying, is that there seems something unevolved about this person who's so highly evolved physically and highly evolved behaviorally and highly evolved business-wise and family man and good heart. And all these ways he's hyper-evolved. But the exact world that he's standing in, the exact thing that he is, the point, there's nothing. It's just like, I keep spinning that lever on that internet, waiting for the big message, and I get a bio, a forum, diet plan, and I'm like, well, so much for that specialness, you know. I think this was important, and I loved your input, and you're still skeptical, right? You're not buying it.
Oh, no,
I'm pretty skeptical too.
Still?
Yeah, I mean...
And we're wrapping it up.
I understand the concept, but...
You really can't, it's hard, huh?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there's nobody like that, but from everything I've seen, I don't see why it's him.
All right.
You know, I agree with what you said about, you know, maybe the other genetic freaks just don't do it. But just being that far ahead of everyone else just seems like, I feel like an anomaly is possible, but...
What's like likely?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that some of the anomalies are mitigated by the population thing. And why aren't you buying it?
Oh, no, I'm saying I definitely can buy it. Now, I was just going through a couple other examples in my head, and I can see how it works.
The comparisons to other people who we know are natty and could become...
That's persuasive,
like,
yeah. That's not so anomalous, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. To a different, like, something that's a bit more popular, even just, I guess, intelligence. Like, you might think, like...
Well, I mean, you would think that I'm...
Well, I mean, you have a bunch of, like, very intelligent people in this room, and if this is all we had been around, you may think that there's, I mean, how could someone be eon smart, and then you have people, you know, like absolute geniuses, like guys, you know, Albert Einstein, Richard Feynman, you know, we could go on and on. You have that, then you have, quickly, like, if you go into just even height, if you just walk through Boston, you might see tallest person maybe like 6'10", 6'11". There's no way anyone can be taller than that. You go elsewhere, you see people 8 feet tall.
Right.
I mean, you can keep going into like other things, even just other sports. There are freaks of nature. LeBron James is well above almost anyone else out there, and basketball attracts a hell of a lot more people than bodybuilding.
So why wouldn't Doug Miller go the next level? I will tell you why, and this is exactly the same reason why he deflates in your mind, is because if he distinguished himself, he could change the whole thing and become the alpha. But he hasn't done that. He's just winning the prize as if the prize makes him the alpha, and it doesn't.
I want to go really big, and this is just emailed Doug, okay, this is a sick idea for you, man. Get like third-party, non-partial drug testing, like every.
Oh, I've already thought about it.
Somebody else
Oh, if I had $1 million, I'd go, Doug, we're going to do a media project. I'm going to test you every week. I'll spend the money, and we're going to document it online and let the world watch for a whole year, and you will be at the epicenter. And then what will happen?
Because everybody.
God, what you could do with
everybody
that.
knows that for content.
$1 million idea.
Everybody knows that for content. Well, everyone knew, like, my friends were telling me before I went to these contests coming up that, like, apparently it's super easy to cheat on the...
And now you're seeing it. You didn't see the testing portion, but yeah, we were all tested.
Yeah,
it's
well, I
all
was
there.
polygraph. I don't know how it's different from, like...
Well, the pros urinalysis and poly, and the winners urinalysis do both. So the rabble, they just throw a polygraph on you just to make sure, and then if you win, you get urinalysis as well. So well, it's like double bagging.
Regardless, the point is like apparently you can cheat on that. So that's why I think it'd be interesting. Like that's why people still have their doubts about Doug Miller, because like yeah, you entered that contest.
Right, because it is permeable. Right.
Yeah. So that's why it'd be interesting if you're just like, hey Doug, why don't you just get tested every month and just like middle finger to the whole fucking world? You know the rumors.
Or and that's what I'm saying. Or put yourself out there in on an extreme, even if you don't get the actual test, put yourself way out on that limb. Like say, I'm impervious to your scrutiny, America. And like put yourself way out there because you know you're clean. Like the truth is on your. Pull a Lance Armstrong, in other words. But this time you're not cheating, so you'll be fine. You know what I mean? Like literally, that's why everyone was believing Lance Armstrong because who put themselves out on such a limb? Spotlight's a great place to hide. But he hasn't done that, so you sort of say, is he hiding? And that's what people, that's your instinct. The fact that you don't buy it, that's interesting. We're going to revisit that. Was this, before we go running up here, was this useful? Was this interesting? Because this was totally, we did not get to periodization. Wah! But was this useful?
Yes.
This was actually one of the more compelling ones we had, I feel like.
Yes.
I can't talk
I'm
to
proud
other
of you,
people
motherfuckers.
about this bodybuilding shit because they don't know dick. Like, how to talk about this to other people? Because I literally can't say anything about this with like half the people I know just like rolling.
Snickering and rolling their eyes, exactly.
Yeah, I don't talk to anyone about.
But isn't this level of hyper like intelligence exactly what they're not expecting? You know what I mean? And we're right on topic of bodybuilding. We have not veered an iota from the process. I'm glad you see that.